Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's session on data management with me, David Durston. We're going to be discussing ePDM versus PDMW, otherwise known as Enterprise versus Workgroup. So, what are these systems? Well, Enterprise, SolidWorks Enterprise Product Data Management is a product data management software solution that can be deployed in a fraction of the time required by other PDM systems. SolidWorks Enterprise PDM is uniquely suited to the needs of small through large distributed design teams and helps organisations manage and share product data more effectively to create better products in less time. As with a lot of marketing spiel, it says a lot without saying too much. If we compare this with the Workgroup one, SolidWorks Workgroup Product Data Management is an easy to set up and use data management system that is uniquely adapted to managing SolidWorks product data for the individual workgroup. SolidWorks Workgroup PDM features include control of file revisions and security management of product data. So, having learnt a lot from that, let's have a look at a comparison between the two systems. So, Workgroup PDM, well known for secure access, revision control, and ability to find and reuse design data. Almost exclusively, we're talking about SolidWorks files here. Whereas Enterprise PDM gives you all of those, but it also has a lot about custom configuration, full document previews, remote access, working through distributed design teams, working over a much larger network, and therefore has the scalability to go with it. A lot of automated systems, including automated approval, a stronger audit trail, and also a better commenting system for checking when and what's happened to things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into Workgroup first of all and show you the features Workgroup has. And once that, we're going to go and have a look at the competing features in Enterprise and then sort of go on from there, if that makes sense. So first of all, we're going to jump into SolidWorks. Now, Workgroup appears within SolidWorks in the task pane as part of the File Explorer task pane, and it's this section down the bottom. So if I log in, what it asks for is what Vault computer the host or the Vault is living on, and this is because we can only have one version of a Workgroup which works with one version of SolidWorks on any one server. And then we log in. For this demo I'm using admin passwords, so I have no passwords just because otherwise I forget them all. But of course you can set up any passwords you wish, and you can save the usernames and passwords to save on the login times. So we have a file structure down the right hand side here, and if we expand this we can see a sort of a file structure. So we have the assembly with the drawing underneath it and the parts that are within the assembly as well. We've got a variety of different colours here. We've got a grey component. This is a non-revision design library component, which although the Vault knows about, it doesn't control. We've then got some black labelled components here. These are components that are in an A or an alpha revision scheme. This is the development revision scheme in my particular setup, and the black ones means I've got edit rights to these if I want to have them. And then we have the orange files. You'll notice these are a numeric revision scheme. These are in a released lifecycle status within my Vault, and I've got no edit rights to them, so they're read only. So if we want to open a file, right click and we've got the option to open checkout. What it's going to do is it's going to show us what we've got, and we can choose to take ownership of it, which I'm going to do, and the revision of the file currently, and then we've got an open now checkbox. Now I have previously checked this file out, so there's a file on my local computer and it's just saying it exists and do I want to overwrite it. In this case I'm going to say yes. So we've got the file here now. What I'm going to do is I'm just very quickly going to rebuild it and save it so that the file is changed, and this is going to allow me to check it back in again. So when I say file, save and check in, it's now looking through the Vault, my working directory, to see if there's any other files related to this, and we get the option to check in. We can choose to retain ownership, which I'm going to do. We can also choose to delete the local copy, which removes it from my local machine. It's saying revision C. You'll notice that I've got a couple of options. I've got both C and B working copy. So I as the user have to choose which of these is the appropriate revision, and I've got two different boxes where I can pop that in from. So I'm going to leave it at C at the moment, and we're going to choose check-in, and I get a warning that I haven't written number and description against this part, just the file name itself. So now I've got the file checked back in again. I can have a look at changing it to a different lifecycle state. So what we're going to do, we can choose to change lifecycle status. We can choose which revision we want to change into a new lifecycle and what that lifecycle is going to be. So I'm going to take the C revision and I can move it to released. So I'm going to say OK to that. You see straight away it turns orange. I lose write access to it, and we'd then be looking to move it to the new revision scheme as well as we checked it out, or the next user takes control of it, if that makes sense. And then I can choose to release ownership of it so that other people can edit the file if they need to. Now we need to search for files and reuse files, so we have the file search capability. What I can do in here is I can set up things to search for example, a document that starts with hydraulic, and I can look for something that has, say, a revision of as A as well. And I can choose to make these add or all criteria. I'm going to stick with the add. And then we choose find, and what happens is it will go through the vault and it will highlight every file that meets the criteria that I'm searching for, and then loop through them. I can also choose to get a report which gives me a list of everything that's available there. In terms of finding out about the file, we've also got something called document information. So if I come back to my leg file, we have this document information window. And what this document information window is it tells me all about the file. So for example, I've got some information about the file. I can look at the custom properties that are within the file, the ones that are set by Workgroup. I can have a look at the history about what was done when and what comments were written about it. If there are any references to the file, so this file is actually designed in context within this assembly, where it's used. And in this case we can see that version C isn't actually used anywhere, but a previous version is used in settlers table, which is why this is grayed out. If there's any attachments where you can put, for example, pictures, PDFs, Word documents, you can bring them into the vault by checking from disk, because obviously you can't check them in from SolidWorks. And we can also see a preview picture and get an eDrawings view of the file from here. And then we can jump around and have a look at potentially other files as well within our vault. So that's a very, very, very quick look at Workgroup, checking or getting hold of a file, taking ownership of it, and then making an edit, in this case just saving it, rebuilding it, checking it back in, changing the revision, having a look at the choices of revisions the user has, and then moving it through the lifecycle. Again, the choice of lifecycle states the user can move it to, and then the search features there. So what we're going to do now is we're now going to start moving and having a look at Enterprise. So again, Enterprise has an interface for the SolidWorks user within SolidWorks task pane. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Open, so the standard SolidWorks Open, and we're going to go into a vault. And as soon as I double click on the vault, it's going to ask me to log in. Again, no password because I'm lazy. And we get our open interface. So this interface is still within the SolidWorks Open dialog. It's exactly the same. It looks like a Windows Explorer folder system. The only significant difference is that we've got the tabs down the bottom here, and the fact that the login box comes up when I access the vault, not when I start SolidWorks. Something I did forget to mention, when you're logging in, those usernames and passwords can be linked to Active Directory, whereas the Workgroup ones can't, they're independent. So it does mean that your users only have to remember one name and password, which does make life a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly jump in here, and I'm just going to open this ARM file. And now what we can do is we can take this file and we can go and have a look at an older version of it, for example. So very quickly I can say let's go and have a look at an older version. So let's go back to this version update, and we can see that this pocket will reappear here. It's currently checked out. It's just warning me I don't want to get a newer version or a different version of it. I'm quite happy for the system to go ahead and do that. So we can see our pocket here, and we get some information over on the right hand side that I'm making changes, and I have an older version, the latest one. So very quickly I can see I've got version 2 of 5. Notice it's talking about versions and not revisions. If I get the latest one again, so just a very simple quick, it's just warning me that it's checked out again. Brilliant, I've got the latest one. Very quickly get to and from my different versions of my part. And the same is true of assembly, so I could go from revision B to revision A of an assembly with a very, very quick couple of clicks. Within SolidWorks Enterprise, we've also got data cards, so I can have a look at the information against the file. So the data card is basically a form where I can record all the information I desire. And on our previous slide, we saw about the customization. This is an example form. You can have whatever fields you like on here, whatever information you want shown can be put on here with a number of different tabs if you want to separate information up to make it easier to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly close this file. So this is how SolidWorks users get to or can get to the information. But there's also a normal Windows Explorer interface. So it's just within Windows Explorer. So we can grab hold of this. If I have a look in the right project, you can see a list of other file types. Enterprises, what I like to call file type agnostic. It really doesn't matter what files you put in, it will control all of them pretty much the same way. We can also get data cards about different file types, and they can be different data cards for each file type. It doesn't have to be the same set of information. Something we can also do is preview files. So this is what we're talking about, full document preview. So that's a JPEG. If I load this in here, this will be SolidWorks Composer Player, and we get hold of the full SolidWorks Composer interface. I can have a look at a DWG, and again we're previewing it all within Windows Explorer, so I don't have to go and open it and do something else with it. That's a SolidWorks, that's a bitmap preview. Although if I click on it, it will load eDrawings in, and then we get the eDrawings preview of it as well. Just give that a couple of seconds to load up for the first time. So we get our full eDrawings preview. We can then also come back and we can have a look at, for example, Excel files. We can have a look at Office files. So all these different file types are previewed and usable or readable directly from the Explorer interface without having to open the file itself. Now, what we're going to do is, if we come back to the main page, now we talked about having automated functionality. So Enterprise makes that possible as well. So we can here say, let's have a new project. And then if it was necessary, we could now have Enterprise ask us some questions. So what's the customer name, for example, or what's the product type? In this case, it just creates us a project, and inside that project it creates us a single file, which is also named with the project number. Now, I know you can create default files quite easily, but what's quite nice is actually having the naming. If that naming needs to pick up any particular document numbers, for example, then those can be fed into the file. So this is all automatic. There's no having to go to a list, find out what the next project number is, rename a folder with that project. It is all done automatically. The user doesn't have any interaction with it, so they're given the number, and there's no Excel file somewhere, a database somewhere. So we can do exactly the same with, for example, new files. So this is a new SolidWorks part, and again, if we required questions to be asked of the user, they could come in automatically. As it is, this file just has a number. That's it. It's all fine. Now, what we notice is that here we're getting a whole load of columns about the file. So these again are customizable by the customer. For example, we're going to be showing description of files, which would be this field here, revision, checked out by, and what state it's in. Now, all files within Enterprise have to live in a workflow, and the workflow defines what you can do with the file next. So, for example, when I want to change state, and I'm about to show you the workflow in just a second, I, as a user, get a choice for no approval required or submit for approval. And I choose submit for approval, and that's helpfully jumped to the back of the windows. So we can now get our file. We're trying to submit it for approval. We've got any comments we want to put against the file, and also if there's any notification comments. So if I want to tell anybody, they'll get an automatic email about what they're going to be doing with this file when it arrives. And we can see that the state's updating, and then I could come in as somebody else, or presumably as somebody else, and say that this file has passed approval. I know the file's empty, but just bear with me. And say OK. And then what happens is not only does the state change, but we automatically receive a revision which populates in the data card. And you'll notice the user has no interaction with that revision number. They get what they're given. The system tells them what they're allowed, and that's what they have to work with. So again, these things are being automated. You don't have to think about what revision to pick next. Do you choose B, working copy? Do you choose C? Do you choose 01? The system knows what revision type you're supposed to be using and what the next revision is going to be, so you get given it. Now, I mentioned that there's a workflow. So what happens is the workflow lives in the administration tool. And again, if I log in, so the administration tool is protected, what we can see is the workflow here that we've been working in. Now, again, these are completely customizable. They vary massively between different customers. This is the nice simple default one. So we started at the top under editing. I then submitted it for approval, and then the file was approved. Now, the revision choice is contained within this past approval. We see an action which is set revision. So this is the system is doing this automatically in the background. So none of this has to be worried about by the user. They have the choices they're allowed to do. Now, when I showed it, I had both submit for approval and no approval required. It could easily be the case that some users don't have this, don't have access to this path, and it just doesn't show up in their interface. Rather than telling them they can't do it, it's just not there, so they're not allowed to access it at all. So what I'm going to do now is jump back to here, and we're going to have a look at the history for this file. So we talk about showing the comments. So again, we've got access to all the history of the file, what happened when, date, time, user, comment if it's put in. We also get pictures, so you get a lovely picture of me there against the admin, and exactly what happened where. So here the revision A was granted. Now, something else that we had a look at in Workgroup was the search tools. So in Enterprise, we can either open the search tool as a separate window, or we can open it within the rest of the display. So I haven't had a new window open up, it's just popped in over the top. And we can then, for example, search within project 004, or we can come back to our macro and we can search for, let's say, pin. Now, we get a lot of results here, and there's a whole load of different results. All of the searches are wildcarded by default, so I have just put pin, and I found tip pin, pivot pin bushing, and so on and so forth. There's a whole load of results here, and all of these will have data card information against. Now, in this case, what I can do is choose to search. For example, I want to check the materials are going to be the right materials. And so if I search in the cards, this is basically filling stuff into the data card, where I'm used to seeing it. I can type in 4340, which is material, and I can narrow my search down to one type, because I'm concatenating this search with the name and location search. So the search is really powerful. All of these tabs can be customized, as with everything else, so we can get down to the things we absolutely want. Now, also within here, we've got the where used, so we can see that this tip pin is used in variety, or in one assembly, but it's used in that assembly a variety of different versions of that assembly. So we can see not only the history of where the file is now, but where the file was, or what other versions of assemblies that file was in. If we then switch to the assembly, we can have a look at the contains tab. This is looking the other way down, so I have my assembly and I'm looking down the tree, and we can see this ARM part that I was in earlier, and we can see that I've got it checked out. Bill of materials, this is another view of the contains, but where you can take snapshots of bills of materials for sending to a particular person, or for approval of the bill of materials before release to purchasing, for example. I'm now going to just very quickly log out of the Vault. So again, it will close itself down and I get kicked back to the desktop. I get warned about logging out. The reason I've logged out is what I want to do is I want to jump very quickly into the web interface for this. So something which is pushed very heavily for Enterprise is the ability to use distributed design teams. Now, those design teams aren't necessarily just your people in a different building, your people at a different site. Those can be suppliers, they can be customers. And you don't necessarily want to give all those people VPN access to your network. So what Enterprise does very well is it's got this web viewer where you can set up a number of folders within the whole Macro Vault, ask people to log into those folders, and then they can see the bits of your Vault that you give them access to. Now in this case, I've been pretty generous, so that we can see all of the various different sections of the Vault and the bits I've got checked out and so on and so forth. But you could easily limit it to a single folder, for example, a released files folder, and they would only see the files that are in there. You then give somebody access to it, and they can see the files in that folder. You could have a customers folder with subfolders in it for the individual customers, for example. Now this web interface is being revamped for next year, which gives it a whole lot more functionality and also brings it to mobile devices, so Apple and Android tablets, Apple and Android phones as well. So there's more to come there, and you'll be able to get to your data, do your data management on the go, as it were. That's a really quick introduction to both what Workgroup can do for you and what Enterprise can do for you. Just a quick jump back. So we've had a very quick look at the secure access. Both systems need you to look at login. A quick look at the revision control. Both systems give you the ability to add revisions automatically to parts. Enterprise, you set it up in the workflow, and it does. The user gets the revision they're told they're going to have. In Workgroup, they may have to choose between a small number of revisions or the next revisions that are possible of the different types. Both systems include search tools. The Workgroup one is a little bit more prescriptive. You've got to be much more knowledgeable about what it is you're actually going to be searching for. Where Enterprise is a little bit more user friendly. It gives you as much information as it possibly can and is much faster to give you those results. In terms of scalability, Enterprise, we have customers who work on 2 different continents in 3 different countries. And it's really got the power to work over those distributed teams without significantly slowing down. Workgroup has an admin tool. It's much simpler than the one we saw for Enterprise, but it doesn't give you anywhere near as much custom configuration. Enterprise, pretty much everything I show you could be customized. We give you some examples and we would help hold your hand, but you can have what you want shown. Workgroup is a bit more like you've got these boxes, you can have it or not have it, if that makes sense. Full document preview. Workgroup does give you a preview, but it really is only for it is only for pictures and SolidWorks files if you're having anything else in your vault. Enterprise, as you saw, a wide variety of common file types. It won't preview anything. If you're putting PCB files in there, they've got some really strange file extensions and it may not understand those. Although if you have a previewer, it will be able to manage it. Distributed design teams, as I mentioned, we've got people in companies and lots of companies with design teams in lots of different countries. It copes with that very well. There's some special functionality in the background in order to stop it having to do the heavy lifting of file data backwards and forwards between people all the time. Remote access, we had a quick look at the web tool. As I said, that's going to revamp and re-improve beginning of next year, which will also make it remote access on mobile. Automated approval process, you saw the workflow going through where I was able to say, right, I want to send it for approval, and then I pretended to be somebody else and that I approved my file. This is something Workgroup doesn't do. You actually have to manually go and say, right, I want to move it from here to there, whereas Enterprise is trying to help you work through your normal process of approval and carry the files along with it. In terms of audit trail, the history within SolidWorks Enterprise, it can't be fudged by the user. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't mess it around. It's stored securely on a database, and you've got that to rely on. And if you set up Enterprise correctly, you can get things like FDA approval and QS 9000 approval based on your workflows, but also because it has that audit trail within it. In terms of collaborating with external parties over WAN, we had a look at the remote access, which is for web, but also with the distributed design teams, it's all over wide area network connections. And then we had a look at the collaborative comments where I gave myself some thumbs up. So as I said, absolute whistle-stop tour of the 2 systems. Thank you very much for watching. Any questions?